love how you explained in the B2B space.
Then when you take B2B, which is very different, right? You're dealing with, I always draw a pyramid when I'm talking to clients. Built a solution that does X, and our solution is Y.
Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another episode of the Equipped Podcast. This is your host Lane Taylor, and I am very excited who we have with us today. We have a fractional CMO that is very big in the B2B marketing SaaS space. And this is a topic that I know a lot of our audience is going to want to hear, and they're going to want to bring and have value from. And so who we have with us today is Chuck Moxley. He's got 20 plus years of driving growth across 6 successful SaaS companies, 10 years of agency experience driving results for consumer and B2B brands. He's got a proven track record of building high performance marketing engines, and he's got a deep expertise in both strategic planning and tactical execution. Beyond his role, he is the author of An Audience of One, which we're going to get into today. He's the host of the Frictionless Experience podcast, and he's a regular speaker at B2B SaaS Growth Strategies. So with that, guys, get your pen and your paper. We're going to get a ton of value today. Chuck, welcome to the Equipped Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lane. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on here. Tell the audience a little bit about you as a fractional CMO, how you got into the role, and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so I'm actually relatively new to the fractional space. I've only been doing it a couple of months, but after 6 successful, it's hard to say this without getting alliteration here, but 6 successful SaaS CMO roles, right? And over 20 some years, I realized I've built a set of playbooks, some frameworks that are successful. And a lot of SaaS companies don't have that. And especially SaaS companies that maybe they're in a startup kind of world and they haven't been able to invest yet in marketing, but now they know they need to. Or maybe they're, a SaaS company, maybe 5 million or more in revenue. They've got a junior marketing team, but they lack that leadership. And so they've got a hungry sales team. They want qualified prospects coming in, and maybe the marketing team just can't quite figure out how to get that. That's where I can come in and help with my playbooks, my frameworks, and very quickly fast track the marketing for a SaaS company.
So let's level set a little bit and let's define the big difference between SaaS marketing, let's say, versus other types of marketing. What would you say the difference is between maybe the generic type marketing?
Sure. Well, and obviously B2B so let's go B2B to B2C, right? Consumer marketing is its own world, right? Think perfume brands and retail and stuff like that there's great expertise there. I had that 30 years ago. That's not where I've been. Then when you take B2B, which is very different, right? You're dealing with typically larger purchase amounts. You've got more considered purchase. You've got more people involved in the purchase decision and the risk. In fact, in the book, we talk about the difference between B2B and B2C. And one of the differences is if I go buy a box of cereal and my family doesn't like it, the cost in that is relatively low, right? If I go buy a piece of software that's being used by 20 of our sellers and they hate it, the cost is pretty big. And the actual true cost is going to be a lot more than a box of cereal. So those kinds of decisions have a lot more people involved, a lot of consideration. Then when we think B2B, like it could be insurance, it could be phone systems, it could be all kinds of things, right? When we think SaaS, so SaaS is software as a service, right? The software business and the technology business has kind of its own challenges and rules. And anybody who's been out there buying SaaS software for any period of time will be able to tell you there are thousands of SaaS solutions. They all look like they do the same thing. They all claim to do the same thing. The categories and the crossover is very great. And so as a buyer, it's very hard to make a good choice. And we as marketers can do a lot to help take our brand and position it differently.
Yeah. So that's so good. I love how you explained in the B2B space how there's so many maybe of what it seems like the same thing, And as a consumer, what I love to do is take a step back. And if I'm a consumer, it's like, okay, how would I want this to be positioned against myself? Or how can this market better? So right now, let's just off the top, like if someone's listening to this right now and you may be in the SaaS space and it's very crowded and it may seem like you're selling and everyone has the exact same thing. How do you stand out? Like, how do you stand out in the marketplace and how would you help someone do that?
The first way you don't do it is talk about your technology. And that's what everybody thinks is the solution. And they have put a lot of techno speak on their site and in their messaging. Everybody is proud of their technology and they're excited about it. A lot of them are in the AI space, right? So they think they've got like the next best thing. The challenge is if you start from the place of your product and your solution, you're going to look like everybody else. You've got to start with your audience. You have to understand first your ideal customer profile, or your ICP, very clearly. And then you've got to start from what is the problem? Nobody actually wants to buy software, by the way. There's nobody who needs to buy software. They need to solve a problem. And if you can't connect what you do back to their problem, that's the first challenge. So you should be coming at the secret to it is understanding the challenge and what the problem they're trying to solve and speak to that. And then there's other frameworks that we do in terms of how do you position yourself differently that we can talk more detailed about. But that's the starting point. If I go to your website and all you talk about is your product, you're going to look like every other product out there. If you instead connect with me as a buyer and say, hey, you're trying to solve this problem, here's how we can help you solve that. You'll eventually get to that. That's going to go a lot farther. And then there's ways that we can build that story that distinguishes you from all the other solutions in the market.
Oh, I love that. And I know that I've been to several websites where it's just, product, and it's talking about all about the product. I've actually interviewed some individuals where it's very technical and I will get off and it's like, oh man, I don't really know what the problem that it solves. I just know that it's a really cool software. I just know that it's really, really cool. And
Right.
so if you're talking to someone or someone's listening to this right now and they just had a light bulb moment, they were like, oh my goodness, I wonder how technical our website is. And they've been in this game for a very long time. And then they go to, man, I don't want to have to change everything. Like if our story is not straight, maybe that's why we're not growing the way we do. What would you say to that individual, that CEO or founder that may be overwhelmed that they need to redo? Like how would you coax them in saying, hey, we got to go back and get your story straight here?
Changing copy on a website is one of the easiest things you can do, right? It's a lot easier than a print brochure that you've printed 10,000 copies of, right? So that's the easy part. And that's where everybody wants to start. Everybody, and I always draw a pyramid when I'm talking to clients and I go, hey, everybody wants to start at the top level, which is the website, the brochure, the sales pitch, the execution. If you start there, that's the problem because you're constantly going to be changing it and you're going to take it out and you're going to get feedback from prospects and you're trying to change it. But it's kind of like I'm trying to think of an analogy here that a consumer could understand. It's trying to focus too much on the color you're going to paint your house before you figured out what rooms you've got or the house you need or what rooms you're going to remodel. Right? You kind of got to figure out, well, what do you want to achieve with this room? Is it going to be more functional? Is it going to be more, et cetera? So where we always start is at the bottom. Most companies have done a good job of defining their mission and vision, right? That's going to drive the company and that's going to drive kind of how they built their product and the problem they solve. The next level up is what I call the brand foundation. And the brand foundation is three things. It's know thyself, know thy competitors, and know thy customers. So know thyself is what makes you unique. What are the attributes that your solution brings to the market that they can't get other places, right? The know thy competitors are what do they bring and where do you fit there? And that's, typical SWOT analysis kind of things. And then the third is know thy customer. And that's where you get at what's the problem? What is their world like? And the challenge that they are waking up every day faced with that your solution could help eradicate, solve, take away some sort of pain. That's it. The next step is your story. And that's what we use a framework. And I didn't make this up, so I can give credit to Andy Raskin, for example, was one of the pioneers in this. You can go check out, he does a podcast where he features this, but it's the methodology that's been proven over 10 years has been used by dozens of companies, and I personally used it in many companies with great success. And it's called a strategic narrative. And the strategic narrative is that story. And the goal of a strategic narrative, and by the way, there's story brand, there's a bunch of different frameworks. What I find works really, really well in SaaS companies is the strategic narrative, because what you've got to figure out, because chances are if you're a SaaS company and you're relatively new, you're solving a problem that's different than the billion-dollar companies you compete with that have built their software and has been around for 10 years. You came up with a better mousetrap. You came up with a better way to solve it, right? Well, the strategic narrative paints that picture. It basically has to paint the picture that all that other software was built to solve a problem you had 5 years ago. The world's changed. Something major has changed in your world, and that's why you're out now trying to solve this problem in the new way. We were built for that. Guess what? We were built for the new problem, not the old problem. And so you need to not think about those other options, because they're going to take you down this other path. And instead, you need the new kind of solution for it. And what you need is, and the way we always paint this in a sales pitch is, here's what you really need. If you buy into the fact that the world's changed and you've got a different problem today, then you need to solve it and you need something that would allow you to do X, Y, and Z. You're not pitching your product, you're pitching a vision of, imagine if you could do this and do this and do this. And you sort of paint this picture, and what you want is a prospect going, oh, that would be awesome. Well, now you get to the pitching your product. And in the course of a 10-minute conversation, that's minute 7 or 8 when you get to your product. Almost every pitch I hear, and one of the things I do when I'm talking to a prospective CEO is I say, pitch me your product. Let me hear how you pitch it. They almost always start with, we've built a solution that does X, and our solution is Y, and it's better because it blah, 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 blah. If that's where they start, you've already lost the battle. Because again, I go back to nobody needs to buy software. The problem in SaaS is there's so many solutions that could solve the problem in so many different ways and so much crossover. So you've got all-in-one packages, you've got point solutions that solve a unique aspect of it. And so from a buyer standpoint, there's too many choices. They all look like they're similar. They're all making the same claim. So when I'm evaluating software, I'm trying to figure out 4 things. Do you solve a problem that I have? Is it a problem worth fixing right now? Is it a big enough problem that I need to invest money in it? Do you do it in a way that's different than something I've already got? That something I've already got could be other software, because much software crosses over, right? So example is, you could have an all-in-one CRM, sales enablement, website hosting, or you could go buy point solutions for all that. I may already have a CRM that's got the holistic solution, so I could solve it with that. It might not be as good as yours, but I could solve it. The other way is I could solve it by building it myself. Another way, I could just solve it by not doing anything, right? They always have the choice of not fixing the problem. And then the last question they're asking themselves is it different than anything else I could buy? Because if I'm out trying to solve this problem, chances are you're not the only company I'm talking to. So how is your solution going to be different than that? Those are the questions they've got to answer. And if you don't answer those questions, you don't pass go. They're not going to go on to the next step.
Okay, I love this. And I know if you're listening to this right now and you're on a treadmill, you're driving, roll back, go listen to like the last 5 minutes, because that was really good. Because I love story. I love story brand, strategic narrative. Like, I've heard the concept of that. I'm a big story brand guy. I love that aspect. When it comes to selling your product or selling the SaaS, and let's say people want to talk about the technology, but then you say, hey, no, we need to talk more about what problem you solve. What is something that you would coach or you would help people say, hey, let's get out of the technical selling? Like, how would you help them say, hey, look, hone in on the problem? What are some of those questions? How do you coach them and say, no, you need to start asking these questions. Start asking these questions. What is that?
Yes. So let me clarify too. It's not that you won't ever talk about the technology. You don't want to lead with the technology. And because I had a conversation recently with a CEO of a SaaS company who said, but I like all the technology on our site. We have a lot of developers come to the site. And what my question back to her was, yes, but who writes the check? Who's the budget holder? Chances are at a budget holder level, especially if you're selling software that's $100,000 or more ARR, your budget holder is going to be somebody at a very senior level, and they're solving business problems with technology. Engineers love technology, right? DevOps people love technology, right? And they love really cool stuff, but they're often not the person writing the check and the budget holder. So your initial story, your story has to work. And by the way, if you do strategic narrative correctly, it's not just a sales pitch and it's not just what goes on your website. It drives your investor pitch. It drives how you recruit employees and how you get them excited about the company. It drives your product strategy. It becomes the story for the company. And it's why you want to start there before you ever write a word of copy for your website. If you start with the website, you've lost the battle. You start with the sales deck, you've lost the battle. Any of the tactics, if you start there, you're going to find, and I get this story all the time. We've tried that. We've tried 100 different stories and they aren't working. Okay, then I think you got the wrong framework. I think you're starting in the wrong place, right? So going back to your question, you'll talk about the technology, but if you don't get them to zero in and get them nodding in that, whether it's a sales pitch or they've come to your website or it's a brochure or a webinar or whatever, whatever tactic this comes to life in, if you don't get them going, holy crap, these guys get it. These guys get it. And this is the thing that's keeping me up at night. This is the thing that we've not been able to solve. We've got a bunch of technology, but we're not solving this problem. And it's creating this problem for me. It's too slow to develop our software. It's where we aren't getting customers fast enough. We aren't solving our sales problem, whatever the solution solves. If you don't get at that problem, and again, keep in mind, the first thing they're trying to figure out when they come to your website or they're in a sales conversation, can you solve my problem? If you don't address it up front, if you start with your technology, and we are a cloud-based end-to-end technology solution that empowers a single source of data, blah, 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 blah. You, number one, look like 400 other companies. And number two, I can't figure out what problem you solve. How many websites have you been to that after you visited the homepage, you go, I don't get what they do.
Oh, wow.
It looks really cool, but especially when you get in the AI world, this is so cool, but how would I use this? If you're asking that question, you've got a problem. You don't have the story straight. That would be my answer.
I love it. I love that. And the idea of going to a website, I've been to several before, and within seconds, it's like I have no idea what problems that it solves. And honestly, I would say that the consumer, the person that may be the buyer for this, maybe not even realize it. Our minds, I don't know, you may be able to speak to this. Our minds may not even realize that we're looking for the solution to the problem that we have. And it's just an automatic reflex. It's like, if that doesn't solve what I think in my mind, in my frontal cortex, then I'm going to go away because it's not clear enough. Is that a fair statement?
That is a great point, Lane, because I think everybody assumes everybody has thought this through and goes, I have the following problem. I need to increase my sales. And that's not how executives think, right? The executives are going, crap, our guys aren't closing enough. And they may not even be out searching for a solution, but they might read your LinkedIn post and that causes them to go to your website, or they read a LinkedIn post and it causes them to engage, or they get called into some sales meeting that somebody junior set up and they don't even know why they're going in there. So that's the real reason why you've got to get to their problem, and you've got to be able to articulate in a way that resonates with them. Mm-hmm. Because what you may end up with a CEO or a senior level decision maker who goes, oh my gosh, you're right. And I learned this the hard way because I've been around for a long time, right? My first SaaS company was a .com in 1999. And I remember distinctly sitting in a meeting with somebody pitching me a solution. And the seller was doing a really poor job. But as he talked, in my own head, I connected this. And so I finally, and I had my team there, and he kept going around and around, and they weren't getting, and I finally said, okay, stop. Here's what problem this is going to solve. We're trying to solve X, Y, Z. What if we took this solution, we did X, Y, and Z with this and solved it with this way? That would solve the problem, wouldn't it? And they all go, oh my gosh, yeah, that would be great. And I'm like, okay, great. Send us an agreement. Let's talk pricing. So I sold it for him because he wasn't getting to the problem, but I came into this meeting knowing I had a problem. But again, maybe I hadn't articulated my brain, but when I saw his solution, I was able to connect the dots. That's great if you get a buyer who can do that, but that's pretty rare. Instead, you've got to be talking the language that gets them to go, yeah. And maybe their problem is our sellers aren't closing enough business. It's taking too long to close deals. We're not hitting our numbers, whatever that is, you've got to tie into those pain. That's pain. right? And your solution has to solve some sort of pain or remove some sort of pain or give them an opportunity to do something they've not been able to do before. That's a big priority for them.
Mm.
If you can't align to their priorities, they're just not going to be interested.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Listen to, again, one of those rewind moments. If you can't hit their pain, then they're not going to buy your solution. So I love asking this question, especially with individuals like yourself. What is there an example that a company has come onto the market that may be just like every other product in the marketplace, but they did an exceptional job at talking about what problem they solved? Is there something that comes to your mind that we could paint the picture for the audience of maybe an example?
So a great example, and this is one that Andy Raskin popularized in a Medium article. His Medium articles had something like 10 million views, and it's a great story. And it's a company called Gong. Gong is it records sales calls, right? Before Gong, there were many ways to record sales calls. All of the platforms had call recording inherent. There were other call recording platforms out there, and they were all going to market saying, we'll help you record your sales calls. We'll help you record your sales calls. Well, nobody woke up one day saying, I need to be able to record my sales calls. What they said, here's what I, as a marketer for going back years, going, why aren't we selling? I go to the sales team. Why are you guys, what are the objections you're getting? They all say it's the price. It's too expensive, and everything. And the problem is, if all you're doing is taking the seller's word or the seller's interpretation of the problem, you are blind to what the real problem is. If you could sit in on those sales calls and start to hear what the customer is actually saying, it might not be price at all. It might be a completely different scenario, but that was how they internalized it. So the idea that Gong changed the conversation, they said, look, here's the challenge. You need conversational intelligence. You need to understand and uncover the patterns of why your customers are objecting, why your customers buy, what resonates and what doesn't. And we can do that because we're going to listen to every sales call and roll that data up in a aggregate way that will start to uncover that. And you can start to uncover common pain points, and that will tell you what you need to be putting on your website, what you need to go back to your sales deck and change in your sales presentation. So all they did was repaint the story of there's plenty of ways to record conversations, but nobody has conversational intelligence. We're the conversational intelligence company. And so they changed the whole conversation with the whole paradigm, and they took off. They were a rocket ship. And then everybody's been wanting to be Gong. In fact, we were a Gong customer. Coincidentally, it had nothing to do with the strategic narrative. When I joined my last company in a full-time role, we had Gong, and we ended up replacing them. And I replaced them with a cheaper solution, and our sellers hated it. Absolutely hated it. And I was getting angry Slack messages, and it had some annoying features like it would announce every time somebody came on the call, and we would do customer calls with 20 or 30 customers. We were enterprise, and it would literally interrupt the call 30 times to go, ding, this call is being recorded. Ding, this call is being recorded. Ding. And it became we had people doing screenshots of it. It was just awful. It was, and I was just trying to save money, right? Yeah. So my mantra became, I've got to find a solution as good as Gong. It's just got to be cheaper. At the time, They were just too expensive. I don't know what they price today. So I'm not saying don't go buy Gong. They're a great solution. To me, they became the leader in the industry. And then I had to find somebody as good as Gong. That became the message. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but the point was, you're reframing the conversation and reframing it as a problem that you're solving. And and I'm sure in their sales pitch, they helped them understand, look, as a CEO, as a head of marketing, as whatever, as a head of sales, you are blind to why your customers aren't buying and why deals are taking too long. We'll help you figure that out. Every seller, every CRO, every CEO wants to solve that problem. Every head of marketing. I used to be blind to that. I used to go on sales calls. I've been on hundreds and hundreds of sales calls in my career. But that was back in in-person selling days. And I would take copious notes and observe patterns and go fix it, right? Now I can do that by just listening to sales calls.
You know what's interesting is for 12 years, I was in outside sales. And suit and tie every day. A lot of people that maybe listen to the show are very familiar with that. And I had big capital equipment. And then there was a season when I did smaller sales cycles. And now that we are on the computer, it's completely different. The way that you enter a room, the way that you see body language, the tonality of body language, the eyes, like it's just different when you're online. And I think it's allowed, or it's set. All the salespeople that are now do a stunt of all online, we've had to adjust. We've had to understand. We've had to navigate that because, I mean, I would have 2 meetings a day. I'd drive all over, the Southeast just to have 2 meetings. And like you said, we do take a ton of notes, and it's just different. It's so different. It's
Yeah.
a good different.
You can't get up and suddenly whiteboard easily, like start drawing on the whiteboard. You can whiteboard in these solutions, but it's so much more awkward.
It is.
But yeah, I agree. And my favorite story on that, before my SaaS days, I was working with an insurance company. And so I said, hey, I want to go out on some sales calls. And they were selling to car dealerships. They were selling voluntary benefits to car dealerships that they would offer their employees. So we get in the car and we're driving down the highway, and she said, okay, your job is to look on the right for any car dealerships. I'm going to look on the left. That was their targeting. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, you don't plan your day better than that? We can solve. So that's the problem. The first problem we solved is we used technology to start to forecast what were the right dealerships to visit, and then pre-scheduling meetings with SDRs. It was the craziest idea. Before that, they literally drove down the highway and looked for car dealerships to go call on.
Yeah, it takes me back. When I very first started my career, I would get a shirt and tie. I was 100% commission, and I would literally go drive around and see who I could find. And about 4 to 5 months into my journey, they came out with this thing on the iPad that was called the Knock Knock app, and it was a map. And on the map, there were locations that we could call on, and it was incredible. I mean, it was like we knew where we were going. We could map it out, and that was a solution that I remember the organization bought, and it helped us all tremendously. Because in the beginning, we just got in the car and said, "All right, let's have at it. Let's go have fun." And that was part of our day. It was fun.
Yeah. I started out right after high school selling advertising specialties. And I would literally go to an office building and go door to door in every office and try to sell them pens and notepads. And that was a hard job.
Yeah. Well, okay, just real quick, and then I want to get to your book. Let's talk about briefly the importance of past clients, or trying to find out what your actual problem solves if someone's trying to figure that out. So in other words, let's say that someone's having an issue trying to sell their product or sell their technology. What's the importance of going back to past clients and or having calls with clients that could be clients? I mean, is that important? How do you have those conversations? What would you suggest with that?
Extremely important. And it's one of the processes when we start. And part of that is getting to your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Very often, especially startups, fall into that. The CEO knew so-and-so, the CRO had a friend that was in this business, and that became their first 3 or 4 customers, which may or may not be their ICP, may not be the ideal customer for their product. And what you end up with is a variety. And I've had this conversation. I just had this conversation this week. Well, because I said, look, one of the things we do is we want to go talk to 5 customers. Well, the problem is I can give you these 5 customers. They have nothing in common. Like, chances are they do. You just never thought to ask the question that way. So going back to your question, yes, you want to talk to them, but it's asking a question in probably a way you've never done it. The way it probably did not get uncovered in the sales scenario. I went back and listened to every single sales call for 2 years with a new prospect. And what I was trying to uncover in that, and that's the beauty of Gong, right? When you're recording calls, right? So I was able to go back and listen to every call. And what I was listening for in this particular exercise were, how did they state the problem? Because I knew how we were stating it, but something wasn't connecting. So how do they state the problem? Did they say, like, at the time it was software for websites? And so what I uncovered, what I could hear in that sometimes was, well, our conversion rate isn't where it is. We hadn't talked at all about conversion rate, by the way. We were talking about the problem we solve is removing friction on the website, but it turns out it was impacting conversion rates. And so they didn't think in terms of removing friction. They thought in terms of improving conversion rate. We just hadn't talked about that. But what was interesting in going through listening to those calls, and I listened to every single first call for 2 years was I had trouble getting the answer to that question, because I found out what our sellers would do is they'd go, "Hey, why'd you inquire?" "Well, we're trying to solve XYZ problem." "Oh, that's awesome. Let me show you how we do that." That was the end of discovery. And I never heard anything more about what was the problem. And we literally had customers who had bought the solution and we didn't know why. We didn't know
Mm,
what caused them to buy. And so that's the purpose of going back and talking to customers, and something I can do as an outside person coming into a company, because I will have a different conversation. I will talk to them. "Well, what was it about? Do you remember the purchase process? Well, tell me about who else you looked at. Tell me about." 9 times out of 10, the seller never finds out why they bought them over another solution, and what solutions did they consider, and what was it compelling about this solution. So it's how you ask. Going back to your original question, how you ask the question is everything, or the questions you ask. It is important to do, but you got to ask the right questions when you go back. And
oh,
that's why,
amen.
like, when that CEO said that to me, I'm like, yeah, but you're not asking the right questions. I bet if I went in, I would find what the common thread is and why they all bought the same solution.
Yeah. And I think this is completely my opinion. Sometimes asking the right question takes someone to just digest what's being told to them, and understanding instead of racing to the next question. Because in your mind, I think we all have the agenda of what we want to ask, and it is much like hosting a podcast. I have my idea of what I want to ask, but if there's something that you say on the show or a guest says on the show that I know that you would want to talk about, why would I not want to go down that path? Why would I not want to go talk about that? Because you're passionate about it. And it's just with sales too. Sometimes I think we want to race to ask the question, when really, if we just digest it and just be human and just ask them, hey, why is that? My 3-year-old would be the best salesperson right now.
Always asking why.
Always. Why? Why? Well, I'm like, kid, you're going to be a great salesperson one of these days. But it's so
And then
true.
we lose it. We turn 10 and we quit asking questions. I don't know why.
So true. So tell the audience, we could have a part 2 of this, because I love this type of conversation. So tell the audience a little bit about an audience of one, the book that's over your left shoulder, or your right shoulder.
Yeah.
What value is that in the marketplace? What was the goal behind that?
Yeah, so it's a book that I co-authored with a very good friend, Jamie Turner, and we wrote it a couple of years ago. And it's about how brands have shifted, and it's heavily, I will say, it's heavily consumer oriented, but we do have a whole chapter around B2B, and the principles still apply in B2B. But at the time, I had come off years of working with GM and Ford and Procter and Gamble and all these major consumer packaged goods, and what we were seeing was this changed that technology finally allowed to go from mass marketing techniques, for example, the way media was always bought, the way we approach the market, to a true one-to-one marketing, which in the B2B world would be called ABM, right? So everybody wants to do ABM. Nobody understands what it is, but everybody wants to do it. I could do a whole episode on that topic. But anyway, that's what the book is about. And it started as more of a passion project. This was Jamie's 4th book and my first book. So when we started talking, he's an old friend, and we were talking, we said, gosh, we've learned so much in the last few years on this, and the world has changed. It'd make a great book. And we started out writing it. At the time, the company I was with, we were just going to self-publish it and use it as a lead gen piece. And along the way, we got interviewed by a Wall Street Journal reporter, that a topic about privacy, because when you start talking one-to-one communication, privacy becomes a big deal. And so we came off that call going, you know what, this is a really hot topic. Maybe we should pitch it. And I didn't know the first thing, but he went and we pitched it to 3 publishers, and we got 2 offers. So we ended up publishing with McGraw Hill. We did a little negotiation, and they ended up with the best deal. So it was a lot of fun. And then that's when the real work, because we had written like 3 chapters at that point. And then we had a contract, and then we had a date we had to deliver. And then it became literally every night, I'd have dinner with the family, and then I'd come here in the office and write for about 4 or 5 hours and get up the next day, go to work, and just repeat that process. And it took about 6 months to write. But it was a lot of fun. I learned a ton, and it's now actually, the book is used in a lot of college classes, because there was no one book written about how technology is changing how you can do this one-to-one communication. So there's a number of colleges that use it. I've actually guest lectured at a number of universities now, which is very fun.
It's incredible. I love it. This conversation has been, um, it has been. I knew it was going to be good, and it's one of those ones where maybe part two down the road, because you are a wealth of knowledge, and I know that a ton of people have had. They're going to have a ton of value for this, and so what I would love for you to do is tell the individuals, where they can find you, how they can work with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you, how do you get the book. I want you to plug yourself all right
Sure.
here so
Well,
people
first
know.
of all, I post on LinkedIn pretty frequently, and I'm trying to post a lot more of just things I'm learning along the way. So I'm Chuck Moxley on LinkedIn, real easy. You can always go to my website, chuckmoxley.com. I've kept it real simple. And then the book is an audience of one. You can get on Amazon or wherever you buy books. It's available in several different formats. So check that out. And then I do host a podcast on frictionless digital experience. Is called the Frictionless Experience. So you can always check that out. We've recorded now. We're up to about episode 40. So we've been doing that for a couple of years now. And otherwise, just feel free to reach out to me. I don't hide. I'm very easy to find.
Yeah, well, Chuck, and listeners too, I will make sure in the show notes that his LinkedIn page, the book, the podcast, everything is hooked in there, so you can easily find Chuck. And Chuck, I appreciate you getting here on the show. Like I said, I know that it's added a ton of value, and I look forward to bringing it out
This
to the
is a
audience.
blast, Lane. Thanks for having me.
Yep, absolutely, guys. Like I say on every episode, please do not go away yet. If you're on Apple, please scroll all the way to the bottom. Give us a 5-star rating and a 5-star review, because that would solve a solution of us getting into more earballs or eyes. Then we need to get this message out. And if you are on YouTube, hit the subscribe and like button. That always helps as well. Or if you know someone that's in the space that Chuck would add value to, all you got to do is hit that little arrow and share it with them. Apple makes it pretty easy to share episodes nowadays. So with that, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Equipped Podcast. We'll see you next time.